Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode on a mother's journey to holistic health and healing. This is episode 57. I am your host, Marissa Prieto, and today is going to be a very special episode, yet also emotional one, I feel. I'm going to be talking about this story of my twin pregnancy, the journey that it really truly was, and one of the most challenging times really for me, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of it. I'm going to be sharing with you all the really hard ups and downs, how I got through it, what I did to help support my well-being through taking, of course, a holistic approach, and what helped me, in hopes that also maybe whatever I share today will help you too. So as always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. But before we get into that, I talked a little bit about how this podcast, I am going to be treating it a little bit more and more like a sacred circle. So just kind of visualizing this space as, even though we are, spread out in the world, in the country, here around the planet, we're all spread out, that we can somehow come together during this time as we listen, even though it's different times, different location, right? If we just kind of visualize ourselves and create some space to think about how that would feel, like if you were, physically present in a circle with other women going through challenging times or healing journey, and what that would feel like if you were sitting amongst them. And so that's how I want to invite you to feel as you come into this circle is, can you give yourself time and space to maybe put away some of the distractions, or even if you're listening while folding the laundry, or while, I don't know, if you're like cutting up veggies to prep, or you're driving on your way home from work, or to pick up your kids, or whatever it is. I really encourage you to try to listen also when you have some alone and quiet time, treating it as a sacred moment for you to pause, give attention to your needs, listening to a nourishing story that might help support you or somebody else that you might know, and using that time maybe also to connect with how you're feeling, what you've been thinking, or even just journaling, right? Or just relaxing, really. Maybe you're just laying down to rest while you listen. And before we get into a disclaimer I am going to share, I do want to invite you to take a couple of deep cleansing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Nice and slow on the inhale and nice and slow on the exhale. So why don't we do that together? Inhaling deeply, at least for a count of 4, and holding it for a minute or a second, sorry, and releasing slowly for another count of 4. We call this box breathing. So at your own pace. Let's do another one of those. Exhale. One more time. Exhale. And on this last one, let's make the exhale for a count of 8. Inhale for 4. And we have arrived. Thank you so much for joining me in that little short breathing practice to come into our space a bit more mindful, a little bit more present, and just to push pause, I should say, putting pause on the outside noise, on the to-do list and everything, so that way we can do our best to just listen and connect in this way from a distance. So I first want to start off by sharing a little bit of a disclaimer. Okay, I want to take this moment to let you know what this episode contains, because I do believe you deserve to decide for yourself, using your own discernment, if today is the right day for you to listen. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about and touching based on pregnancy loss. This is my own personal miscarriages, as well as brief, just touching base with the experience of terminating a pregnancy due to serious medical complications, which of course is one of the hardest decisions of my life. I actually go into a lot more detail about this experience in one of my previous episodes. So if you'd like to know more about that story in more detail and what I did to get through it and how I healed through that, feel free to visit that episode when you feel like you have the capacity for it, the energy for that. I'm going to be talking about this high-risk pregnancy, right? What that entailed, how I felt, the fear, the past trauma, all the triggers that I've had. So definitely I am sharing this to just give you that heads up that if you feel like this is something you're ready to listen to, you think it's going to help support you and getting ideas and helping you support you through maybe your pregnancy or postpartum, thank you for being here. And if it feels a little too heavy right now, right? If you feel maybe you're in the middle of a loss or a really hard diagnosis or grief, or still carrying that grief, please, save that episode maybe for another time. If you feel like it would be a little too much or too heavy, there's absolutely no rush. And for those of you that are ready to listen, thank you for being here again. And just want you to know that I'm going to be as open, as real, as much as possible. Just to share also what I've felt, what I've gone through, and that you're not alone, but also what happened on the other side when I found healing modalities to help me through the pregnancy and support that I received, and help me get through also the delivery and postpartum a little bit. So we're going to get all into that. And this is in honor of my baby girls, my twin girls' birthday week. Their birthday will be on Friday, March 27th. I am pre-recording this as really kind of like this tribute. I haven't really given myself that time to reflect on all that I went through with them. And prior to that, all that I went through, prior to conceiving them, the journey of having a miscarriage before my son, and then having my son, and then having that medical termination due to those complications, and then having another miscarriage, and then the pregnancy. So, there was a lot that stirred up, a lot of fear that is stirred up within me and that built within me and resided in my body and in my heart, and grief, which I held on to for quite a while until I felt ready. So I'm going to kind of go through like a little flow and story in terms of like the preconception, what I did to help me with the preconception phase, what happened during my pregnancy as far as like the earlier months, and some support during the time of making a decision of, vaginal birth versus C-section birth, and how I was able to make a confident decision. I went from, lots of fear and self-doubt to making a confident decision. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got through that. And then, as well as a delivery and what that experience was like for me, and how I got through it. And I'll touch a little bit about postpartum there too as well. But what I do want to share is that it's really beautiful and amazing. I know at the beginning it's always really tough, and through the middle it's always so tough because of the uncertainties and we don't know what's going to happen. But at the end, it's a really beautiful time to, when you can, right, have this self-reflection, because you're able to bring together gratitude for, yes, so it was a really difficult time for whatever you went through for the past. You see the outcome, the results, what happens in the end, like everything that I feel like that I did, the healing, the work, really just strengthening, doing whatever I could to strengthen my mind, my heart, my body. And I'm going to go into more deeper detail what I mean by this, that helped me, bring my baby girls, my twins, to full term when the high risk doctor wanted me to induce at 35 weeks, 34 weeks, right? And how I did that. And then at the end, just realizing like, oh my gosh, I've had, these 3 pregnancy losses, and here I am. I have now 3 beautiful, healthy babies. And so, early on, we have a lot of thoughts and fears and like, how could I say, things that we feel are not possible. When we start to really slowly, gradually let go of that way of thinking and those limiting beliefs, we can then start to see what is possible. And I know it's easier said than done, but it does take time and it does take some work. And so I'm going to share with you what's helped me along the way. So again, if you want to go back to that previous episode of my experience with that medical, termination with that pregnancy, you can go back to that to see what helped me to really get through that, because that was a lot of healing work that I had to do to conceive these two babies. And I truly believe that letting go of that grief, healing, forgiving myself, and finding peace allowed me to have these babies. And I freed myself from that guilt, from that pain, from that grief that my body was holding on to, my organs, like all of it, in which helped me to have room and more room for life to grow and create life. So I want to be sharing my story with you because I feel it is really powerful, and I want you to know that, this story, the reason why we have all these stories, right, is to show you what's possible and that you're not alone. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. Again, thank you so much for being here and for listening. Again, pause if it feels like it's heavy, or come back to it whenever you need to. Okay. All right, I'm going to take a deep breath. All right, so I'm going to start off. So there were days, I'm just going to tell you, just to kind of give you a little glimpse of how I felt throughout this pregnancy. There were days I couldn't get off the bathroom floor. And that's because I was, my head was in the toilet, obviously, constantly vomiting several times a day for the first 5 months, I would say. There were days I had to take this medication, Lovenox, my risk for blood clotting, and when my husband or myself, I had injected myself, I'd be crying, right? So a lot of those days, lots of crying days, the days where I hated going, I did not look forward to going to my doctor's appointments because of what I would hear and fearful of what I would see, right? Are the babies okay? Are their heart beating? And somehow through all of this, right, I always had to come back to my practices to reassure myself, to bring myself to center, to ground myself, to free myself and let go of a lot of that fear that I was carrying, not just that I had my own fears, my own thoughts, but what the doctors were, telling me, like the worst case scenarios, which I'll get into that a little bit more. And so the more and more that I reflect on it now, that's what I was doing. I was trying to put in my practices to help me reground myself, recenter ourselves. And that's what we're constantly having to do as mothers right now, especially in this chaotic, destructive, very disturbing time that's happening around the world around us. Okay. We have to find ways to ground ourselves, even through motherhood, right? Not just the outside world, but even through motherhood and all the stimulation. We have to find practices that help ground us, that help calm us, that help soothe us in this present moment and help soothe our inner child and our younger selves. And when we can find these practices, they accumulate over time in our tool belt, and we're able to pull out what we need when we need it. So I'm going to share with you what these tools have been for me through my pregnancy, and I still do today. So I'm just going to start off by talking a little bit about the preconception phase. As I mentioned before, I carried, a lot of fear, was kind of unsure about whether or not we wanted to have another baby. I was very scared and fearful about what ifs, all the what ifs that you can think of. And finally, I remember now, my husband and I, we were even looking into adoption agencies now that I reflect back, because we were trying without no luck. Until finally, my friend, we were talking one time and she brought up a fertility specialist. And I thought, well, that's something I haven't done. I haven't looked into working with a fertility specialist. And so I made an appointment and I did. And just FYI, a fertility specialist can mean different things. Maybe it's not necessarily a medical doctor. Maybe it's a midwife. Maybe it's a medicine woman, maybe who has an extensive background and experience in womb healing and preconception, or doula, right? So just kind of want to throw that out there. It doesn't always necessarily have to mean a medical doctor. Okay, but the one that I saw was a medical doctor, so Western medicine here that I was receiving. And I went to my first visit and just told them about my past history of my pregnancy losses, and they took labs, and turns out I was deficient. My progesterone levels were low, and that I was at high risk for blood clots. So I had to take progesterone, and then they gave me what was called their vitamin cocktail. It was just basically several different types of vitamins in addition to the prenatal. So I started on that. I started on the vitamins. I started on my progesterone. Me and my husband were doing our thing. During this time, I was also trying my best to eat healthily, eat regularly, having my balanced meals, my water intake, trying to move my body in not strenuous ways. Because my very first miscarriage, I felt that I felt in my intuition that I overdid it, and so I really wanted to be more cautious and not do intense movement. I wanted to fixate on doing movement that felt good and still got my heart rate up, but it wasn't super intense, right? So I listened to my body and I did movement that felt good. I tried to get adequate amounts of sleep. I would do my yoga practice. I would do my meditations. That's basically how things looked pre-conception, until one day I took my pregnancy test here at home and it was positive. So I was like, okay, to my husband, all right, it's positive. Let's see what happens. So we book our appointment to go follow up in another couple, I guess it was 4 weeks or so. I go back, and this time my husband's sick. I'm kind of sick, but he's worse. And at this time we have to wear our masks to go into the office, right? Because they were all scared of the whole COVID thing back then. So my husband waits in the car. I get down, I go in, and they're doing the scan. And he's like, okay. He's like, wow, you're going to have twins. And so I have my husband, I called him on video chat, right? I have him on video chat. And I'm just like, I thought he was joking. I literally just said, shut the fuck up. No way. You're so funny. I just laugh, right? And he's like, no, you're going to have twins. And this time he said it's serious. I was like, what? I did not know how to react. I was in shock. Basically, I was in shock. And my husband on the other line, and I don't even remember what his response was. I was just in shock. And mind you, like at this time he's telling me about his sons, that he has twins, and he's asking me, are there twins in my family? I'm like, my sister has twins, and I have cousins that are twins, and he's like, oh, we're friends in the family. So he's giving me this whole little, having a conversation about his life with twin sons, and I'm over here in shock, like trying to grasp it all. And so I leave, and then we're on our way home, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe it's twins. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? And so we drive home. I leave the picture of my sonogram on my parents' front door because at the time they were sick. We were sick. We didn't want to, I didn't want to risk that, especially since I was pregnant too. So my parents call me and they're just crying and crying. They're like, oh my God, is this, you have a twins? I can't believe this. I'm like, I know. And so, that moment on, it was already fear. Okay. From the moment that, and just kind of like, what are we going to do? Kind of a thing. And I remember feeling gratitude and joy, but at the same time, for me, it was like, okay, don't get too excited, right? And if you've personally had an experience with pregnancy loss, right? You know that the second time comes around, you're scared, you're grieving, you're worried, you're concerned, you have a lot of uncertainties, and there's always the what if thought, right? So for me, it's just one of those things like, okay, not until we bring them in this world healthily, then can we fully celebrate. So that's pretty much what the majority of the pregnancy was like for me. Maybe towards the end of the pregnancy is when I started feeling better. That's when I started to, and what I mean by feeling better, I'll get into that in a minute. When I started to have a little bit more of connection with my babies in the womb. So the first few months were probably the most brutal, right? Months up to like month 5, because I experienced the hyperemesis gravidarum. And if you're not aware of what that is, it's basically one of the most severe forms of morning sickness. Although it doesn't happen just in the morning, it can happen all day. And there are different stages. And so I had more of the mild stage, thankfully, but I can't imagine how women must feel with the most severe stages. And I, being part of their support group, I was part of a support group. I was able to see what kind of impact, a negative impact it had on them. The first few months were rough. Tried my best to prepare myself mentally before, during preconception with like, okay, it's going to be all right. You're going to get through this. Like trying to notice any negative thoughts and just reframing them with more comforting and soothing ones. So that was always something I started practicing from the get-go. Is I was trying to always be aware and be mindful of those thoughts and not letting them overpower me, the dark ones. I didn't want them to overpower me, and I would do my best to bring myself back to center and more neutral, more soothing thoughts instead, just telling myself things that I needed to hear. There was lots of days where the majority of that time was spent of me literally just throwing up and laying in bed and resting, doing my work and my laptop in my bed. It was literally survival mode. And thankfully I had my mother-in-law, my mom to help me with my son at the time, and of course my husband. But it was very difficult, very challenging. I had very little energy. The little energy that I did have was taking a shower when I could. I was very weak. I was very nauseous all the time. There were a lot of times of crying. I'd just be on the toilet crying because of that pain and discomfort that you feel from your stomach of constantly heaving and in your mouth, your throat, like your head, right? All of it. So the majority, half of the pregnancy was spent feeling really down, not just physically, but mentally. So mentally, I started to notice I was more in a darker place. Like I didn't have any joy. I was doing my best to show up for my son, of course, but, it was not natural. I had to force myself. And, I finally, maybe like month 2 or so or 3 is when I talked to my doctor about it. I tried to do all the natural things. I tried to do the ginger, those morning sickness lollipops, the teas, like all of that, and nothing really helped. And so I talked to my doctor about it. Like, okay, let's try this. Let's try the Zofran with the, what I use, Unisom is what I used. I used Unisom and the Zofran combined at nighttime, I think. And that really helped. That started to really help minimize it. So when I started to feel better and that started to subside gradually, little by little, or was controlled with those medications, I then felt a little bit better to do things for myself. So what do I mean by that? So I was able to eat a little bit more. Right? I was able to eat a little bit more. I focused a lot on cold foods. That's what helped me, like no sugar added canned peaches, melon, really kind of like hydrating, cold, refreshing fruits, soft foods like crackers and bread and things like that. Hard cheese is what helped me during that time, and just eating small, frequent amounts couple times throughout the day. And that helped in terms of my nutrition, right? And then I had my movements. Okay, so now that I was barely starting to feel better again, I was focusing on stretching and yoga. I was going on short walks, and I mean like 5-minute, like around the block walks, just to get some sunshine, some fresh air. If I had a little bit more energy, I would do 10 minutes, right? Depending on how I felt, I would do a little bit more. And that was the majority of my movement. As I started to gain a little bit more energy and it was controlled more, the more and more I was able to add and pull out of my self-care tool belt. So then I started incorporating my guided meditation. I would focus on my deep breathing because I know that was going to be very important during delivery. So I focused a lot on doing breath work videos, listening to soothing music, soothing sounds. I also practiced self-Reiki, which I talked about in one of my videos too, is basically just visualizing whatever color light that's healing light, universal life force energy. You could visualize it coming from your higher power, God, Jesus, Mother Mary, the angels, whoever your higher power is, or if you don't, the universe, and just basically healing you with this light. And so for me, I would rub my hands together. I would visualize this light in my hands, and I would place my hands on certain parts of my body. So it was either on my head, on my heart, on my womb space, anywhere where I felt tension. And I would just visualize this healing light soothing me, calming me, and healing me. And this helped, I feel like this helped me tremendously to really relax my body and my mind. And with this attention and focus on visualization, it was able to be more powerful. So the visualization is very, very powerful. And I felt like this really helped me to take my focus off of a lot of that negative mindset, negative energy, and bring in more healing and more love in this way, and a connection. This is how the connection started building with my babies, was during this time, was during my meditation time, was during my breathwork time, and my self-healing Reiki practice. And anyone can do it. You can just, look it up, look up a YouTube video. That was a really regular part of my routine. Another part of my routine that was a non-negotiable was massage. And so either my husband would give me a massage on my lower back with an essential oil cream for pain relief, and I would massage myself. So in the shower, this is called in Ayurveda, it's called abhyanga. In abhyanga, you either massage yourself with some oil, like almond oil or vitamin E or whatever oil you have. And you can do this before you get in the shower. For me, I usually just did it in the shower, just to knock it out at the same time. And I would massage myself from, head to toe, my shoulders, my feet, my hips, anywhere that I had tension, my calves. I would just massage myself in the shower, my scalp, my temples, and while breathing at the same time. And so the combination of the water hitting me, circulating the blood around my body, the massage, the lymphatic system, like everything I felt really helped to soothe my nervous system, calm the nausea, calm my mind, and help me ground myself. So this was really helpful. I didn't take too many baths, but I tried to take as many as I could with Epsom salt and essential oils. And that was very calming and soothing. And essential oils were also really helpful for me too, for the nausea: lavender, lemon, peppermint. Those were some of the main ones that I used during that time, whether it was in a diffuser or on my pillow. Those were really helpful for me. And prayer, lots of crying, and lots of rest. Also, therapy as well. The therapy that I had, my therapist was really helpful during that time to express all my concerns, all my worries, all my fears, and to talk through them, journaling. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, joining a face group of women who were experiencing hyperemesis gravidarum as well. And so, during the tough times at the very beginning, going on there to just share how we felt, right? Other women who were going through similar experiences. I also saw the hardest of times that women were going through. Some women wanted to take their life because they were in a dark place. And for the women that have a more risk of depression, or you already are postpartum depression, and you have hyperemesis on top of this, you're more at risk for suicidal ideation. And so a lot of these women were expressing, I can't do this anymore. I want it all to end. They were just saying really, really harmful, terrible, sad things. Or I'm going to have to end the pregnancy. Some women ended the pregnancy because it was too hard on them. It was taking everything out of them, and they couldn't live their life. And, they would share how much they were being judged by the people around them for ending the baby's life. They were being judged and ridiculed and criticized because of that, which, really hurt me. And I really felt a lot for those women. And just to be in that space, to see what they went through, I cried for them, I grieved for them, I prayed for them. Really puts into perspective how devastating, how debilitating this condition is, just like depression can be, right? But then you add on top of this condition, this medical condition. And some women experience it throughout their entire pregnancy. I'm blessed that it only lasted like up until the 6th month. I still had some nausea and a little bit of vomiting the rest of the pregnancy, but it wasn't as extreme as it was in the beginning. So those are some of the main things that really helped me mentally, was telling myself comforting, soothing things whenever I needed to hear them. And this is with catching those negative thoughts, or this is when I noticed myself spiraling or feeling fearful or worried after a doctor's appointment, for example. after hearing them, put like fear, telling me about the consequences. If this is what happens if this baby could die, this baby could pass away at this point. I had to prepare myself with these thoughts that could help support me. And of course, I would leave feeling sad, defeated, discouraged, which is how we should not feel when we leave a doctor's appointment, right? They should be empowering us. They should be educating us, not telling us what to do. And instead, they're kind of instilling fear. And I guess it depends on how you look at it, but depending on the provider, right? They could educate it in a way that's not instilling fear, right? This is what I want you to know. I'm not telling you this to be scared or afraid. I just want you to know this is possibilities, or just whatever, like putting it in a more gentle way. And some doctors don't know how to talk to their patients. So thankfully I had my tools, my tool belt to help me and to get through all these appointments with particularly the high risk doctor, right? Because after a certain point in the pregnancy, I stopped seeing her. I was like, I'm not going back there. Why am I going to see her when she's just going to put fear in me? She's making me feel like crap every time that I go. It's not helping me. Another thing added to it is I was having to pay out of pocket a certain amount of money because my insurance was not covering it. That made me more upset because they're just trying to make money off of it. I'm like, no, I don't need to go there anymore. That's it. Why am I still going? And so I finally stopped going and just kept seeing my OBGYN. She, on the other hand, was a lot more supportive. She was more open and she would listen and she would ask me of my concerns. And so I, just want to remind you that, if you're not happy or feel comfortable with your provider, get a second opinion. Maybe it's a midwife. Maybe it's seeing another kind of doctor and just getting other people's feedback and reviews, right? Because it's very important for your own well-being that you feel comfortable, that you feel safe, that you feel heard and seen, and that you don't feel like you're going in there asking questions and you're feeling bad about it. You should not have to feel bad about asking questions, right? And getting educated on what's happening. It's your birth, it's your babies, and it's your body. We got to start being our own advocate. And so the next thing, now that we were moving further along into the pregnancy, and now that I had more time to think about it, come month 6, was how are we going to deliver this baby, right? I wanted to deliver more than anything vaginally, right? I always wanted to deliver vaginally. I was totally afraid of C-section. And because the thing I was most fearful of, to be honest, was the recovery. Because I've heard how painful it could be. And and it's a surgery. I've never had a major surgery in my life. So that was one of the main fears that I had about it. And so it took me some time. I did a lot of research on vaginal births for identical twins, and mine were in the same sac. So it was a little bit trickier. And so I did all the general article research I could and try to, go online and look at other women who had that experience. That they, were they able to deliver safely with their twins? And a lot of women shared that they did. And you find so many mixed messages out there, right? And so on the one hand, I'm like, I know my body's smart. I know our body holds wisdom. I know my body can do it. But then on the other hand, you always have the what ifs, right? So that was the thing I was really battling with. And I knew what I wanted. I wanted the vaginal, but at the same time, I was still fearful of the what ifs. From what the doctors have told me and the journal articles, that for twin babies, it was recommended that not to go past 37 weeks. So the next thing that I did was I looked for a doula. I thought maybe a doula could help support me in this time or during the delivery. So I looked for a doula. I found one, and I met with her, and she was so supportive. She listened to my concerns, and she helped me. She really, truly helped me make a confident, founded decision for the delivery. So that was the thing that was most important to me, right? So I ended up having a C-section. I think the reason why I wanted also have a vaginal is because it was kind of like a rebellious one. Like I wanted to just prove to them, see, you can deliver twin babies vaginally. But a part of me was also like, don't risk it. Do the safer way, right? So I ended up talking it with her, which was very supportive, and able to come to a confident decision. When I talked to my OBGYN about it, I said, you know what, we can go ahead and schedule the C-section. And I told her I don't want to induce. Let's go to as far as we can. And she said, okay. I totally disregarded the high risks, 35 induction. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And instead said, we're going to go as far as we can. And so we went up to 37 weeks, and that was as much as my body could take. And we ended up scheduling it. So this whole time, I'm still preparing myself mentally. I'm still doing all my practices. I'm still doing everything that I can, yet it's still draining, emotionally draining, because you still have the fear of the delivery next, right? So now it becomes an even different mental preparation, a different physical preparation. Now I'm doing more exercises for my hips. I'm doing different types of yoga postures. I'm walking. I'm focusing on my breath work. So that's how I worked or managed to get through that during the last few months of pregnancy. Come the day of, by the way, how were you feeling the day of your pregnancy or the day of delivery for you, right? Especially if your first C-section or vaginal. Can you remember how you felt? Each time it's a little different. So, of course, I was nervous. I was scared. I was terrified. I kept trying to just come back to my prayer, to my affirmations, to my soothing, comforting words to myself. Have our bags packed. It was in the morning. My husband drove us there in the morning. I had my essential oil, my lavender, my masks. At the time, we had to wear our masks. Got to there, I got all prepped. And thankfully, I had a caring, very, very caring, kind nurse held my hand as I got the epidural. And prior to rolling into the OR, I had asked my OBGYN if I could have a playlist. That's something I forgot to mention. I created a playlist to listen to that they would play on their system while they were delivering the babies. And she was okay with that. So that might be something you might want to think about is, can you create a playlist and listen and play it while you're giving birth? So I had the playlist. I put my lavender essential oil on my mask so I could breathe that in. I'm focusing on my breathing. I'm telling myself everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. My husband's in there holding my hand. They pull up the curtain. They start doing their thing. I'm feeling the tugging. I'm feeling the pressure, right? From them pulling out all our body parts, our organs. And here comes the first song, which is Into the Mystic by Van Morrison, one of my absolute favorite songs. And out comes baby A. And I'm just crying, and they're like, it's a girl. And mind you, I did not want to know the sex up until the day of birth. It didn't matter to me as long as they were healthy. Out comes, oh, it's a baby girl. And I'm just crying and crying and crying. I'm like, oh my God, it's a girl. And I thought this whole time it was going to be a boy. I thought they were going to be boys. And then they bring out baby B a minute later, and then they're just crying and crying, and they bring them to me, to my face. They have them near my face, and I'm just giving them a kiss. I'm just so happy. I'm just crying and crying, so emotional. I was, just the whole time just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, that they were healthy, that we got through it safely. Next thing I know, they're cleaning me up, doing all the things, putting me in recovery, and I'm just thirsty. I'm downing everything I could of liquids, which we couldn't, but the nurse, since I kind of knew her, she basically just brought me everything that I wanted that I could ask for. She's like, you really shouldn't drink that much fluid. And I'm was beyond thirsty, and that was helping to soothe me with the ice chips. Well, sure enough, I paid for it. The next few nights at the hospital, I'm throwing it up. I'm vomiting for so many hours. Then not to mention the lack of sleep because the babies are crying and they're hungry. Both of them are hungry. I'm producing very little milk. I had to, supplement with formula. And again, that was something I did not want to do because I knew that I just had to wait, right, to let more of the milk come in. But they were crying every hour to 2 hours, and I was depleted and exhausted. So we did as much as we could. I nursed as much as I could. And then we supplemented with whatever they needed so that I could get some sleep, right? And at that point, moms, we have to look out for ourselves and our well-being. I know you want the best for your babies. I know you want to nurse them. I know you know it's what's best for them, but also remember what's best for you too. If you want to be able to produce, we have to make sure that we're getting enough sleep or getting some sleep, and that our nervous system, our hormones, our stress hormones are managed. I'm not going to say like calm because that's not happening, but manage so you can produce the milk, right? And so I let that go. I'm like, yeah, we can supplement. That's totally fine, because I knew that it was the best for me and the babies. We can supplement. I'll produce whatever my body's going to produce, and I'm okay with that. And we can supplement, and I'm okay with that. So that allowed me to have more energy, let go of a lot of stress, and that I could sleep a little bit more. But, it was tough. It was tough postpartum, especially with the recovery. And I'm so thankful for my mom to have been there to help me, help me out of the bed, help me in the shower, help me get out, help me walk. She's always been there. My mom, may have worked so much when I was little, but she has been there for me through some of the hardest times in my life. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for her. And, so, it was a really tough time. It was a really tough time. That's why I say it was one of the most challenging times for me mentally, because I really had to overcome a lot of mental hurdles, fears, doubts, uncertainties, worries. I had to learn how to come to a place of more neutral, more peaceful, soothing thoughts that could remind me of what's possible. That's going to be okay. I had to take care of myself physically, with every energy and ounce that I could, for not just my son and myself, but for my babies, and take care of myself in that way. And emotionally and spiritually, I cried. I allowed myself to cry when I needed to cry. I was angry when I was angry. I allowed myself to feel what I needed to feel, and I turned to prayer and my meditation and breath work when I needed that comfort, when I needed that soothing. And that's pretty much what helped me get through it is all of those things. All of those things helped me to, get through this amazing twin pregnancy journey. It was definitely something I'll never forget. It helped me realize how strong I am, how strong our bodies are. And from that moment on, I just had such a greater appreciation of my body. And I always tell my body, after I had the pregnancy, after I delivered, I would always tell my body, thank you, body. Like, thank you for all that you've done for me. Thank you for carrying these babies. Early postpartum, I wasn't quite able to connect with them too much until I was able to get more sleep. So I want you to know you're not alone, and that if you don't feel that connection with your babies in the womb or postpartum, you're not alone. And, just trying to take care of yourself is one of the best ways that's going to help you to be able to connect with them. When you're taking care of yourself holistically, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and getting support is essential for us as mothers. And we don't have that these days in our society. So whether it's support from family, friends, and in your community, your workplace, maybe they're pitching in for meals, gift cards, therapy, coaches, in any way, doulas, in any way that you can seek support is very important. Support groups, things like that, because we truly need that support postpartum. We need that support postpartum, especially if you are experiencing postpartum depression. Please seek guidance. I'm going to leave some resources in the show notes. If you are experiencing this or know somebody who is, please talk to them. Please connect with them, because it is so important for us moms to take care and watch out for other mothers. So that is my story, friends. It feels good to share it, to reflect, to let go of that, worries and fears, and remind myself and remind us of what's possible when we invite more light and more faith. That is something that I reminded myself of, was faith and hope. And that's why one of my daughters' name is Faith. Is because I kept the faith throughout the entire pregnancy. Please keep the faith. Have faith in yourself. Have faith that you will get through it, and everything is going to work out. It's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. If you're in the thick of it right now, whether it's, the morning sickness, the fear, doctors making you feel bad for certain decisions or, for wanting something different. I know what you feel. I've been there. I see you. What we're doing is one of the hardest things we can do. Carrying a child and making hard and tough decisions is so hard. And, you'll get through it. You are strong. You are capable. You have the capacity to do anything that you can with support, right? With support and just honoring that and honoring your body and tuning into your body and what it needs and what it's trying to communicate with you. I want you to know you're not alone, and I hope this episode helped you. If it resonated, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, or leave a review, like and subscribe, so that other mothers can receive it too. Maybe it'll help them as well. Leave me a message or email me. I read everything. And to my twins, to my baby girls, Maya and Faith, you and Eli, you all are my everything. And it was truly a journey. It was truly an initiation, a struggle to see how strong I am mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, putting it all, I'm not going to say to the test, but putting it all to make me stronger. And seeing where I was before and the comparison to now, it was all worth it, and it's all been worth it. So thank you all for listening, friends. I appreciate you being here and listening. As always, take good care, and I'll catch you on the next one.